G'day guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. I haven't been making too much videos of late because obviously it's off season, and you know, with off season content, you know how it is that you don't get a lot of content. But yeah, I'm here today to discuss the recent gather round fixture that's come out, which is pretty exciting. Can't believe they've already released their gather round fixture for next year. I don't exactly know which round it will be in. I believe round 4. That's what I've heard. It doesn't actually say on the little pamphlet like I've got up on the screen now, with all the games, venues, times, days. Very, very exciting. And yeah, we'll go through them. Not the fixture I was expecting at all. I don't think I predicted a single game out of mine that are actually, you know, going to feature. There's a few in here I want to specifically speak about. 2 big Victorian games, or I guess you could say 3 in particular. The Adelaide games, of course, and also the rest, which are, in my opinion, a little bit deader games. But of course, all of these are in Adelaide time slots. Can't really convert them to our time, or my time slot at least, but I've given it my best go. But yeah, the first game is Adelaide and Melbourne on Thursday night, on the 4th of April, 7:40 Victorian time. Should be an interesting game. Of course, Adelaide opened up in this year's gather round against Carlton. This time it's going to be against Melbourne. Should be a good game. Not expecting it to be a massive game, but it should be fairly entertaining. I can see it being a high-scoring game. Obviously, don't know what the weather's going to be on that day, which will obviously come into it. But yeah, should be an interesting game, and I rate it. Then we got the double header on the Friday again, and this is kind of lame, to be honest. We got it again this year. We're going to get it again. It's going to be at Norwood, 5:10 Victorian time on the 5th of April. It's Brisbane versus North Melbourne. This game was played at Mount Barker this year. It's going to be played at Norwood next year. So at least they've changed up the venue. At least they've bothered to do something there, but not expecting this to be an entertaining game at all. I'm not expecting too much people to tune into it, let alone go. It'll probably be the deadest game of the whole gather round, in my opinion. But yeah, you never know. Doubt we're going to see an upset there as well, because what you want is 2 teams in gather round that, you know, are pretty good and are pretty even, so it's more of a 50-50 game. This is my opinion anyways, to make it closer, because the more close games, the more memorable and entertaining they are. No one's really going to remember the absolute smashing this year from Brisbane North Melbourne. So yeah, that's interesting how they've gone with that same time slot, as it was pretty poor this year. But anyways, moving on to the Friday night game, same day, at 8:10 Victorian time, Port Adelaide versus Essendon. Now this is one I can see being a good game. Not expecting it to be the best, but clearly a standout, obviously being an Adelaide team as well. Port Adelaide, home game, obviously. You'd expect to see pretty big fans tune in for this one. A lot better than Port Adelaide versus Bulldogs, which was held this year. Now moving on to the Saturday games on April 6th. To be honest, I don't really rate any of these games, to be honest. I start off with the first one at Adelaide Hills at Mount Barker at 1:30 time slot in Victorian time. Sydney versus West Coast. Yeah, this could be a repeat of this year's Sydney versus West Coast. Maybe not as bad, but it's going to be the biggest smashing, in my opinion. At least that's what I've gone for. That's what I've tipped so far of the whole gather round. So, yeah, have fun, West Coast, in your Adelaide Hills adventure. They'll become both of these teams haven't played at Adelaide Hills either. They'll become the 3rd and 4th team, respectively, to you know, play at the Adelaide Hills, so exciting for them. But yeah, pretty dead game in my opinion. Not really worth going to. Same with the next one, Carlton versus Fremantle at the Adelaide Oval, 4:20 Victorian time slot. Not a fan of this one, to be honest. Carlton had a really interesting game in last year's gather round, so maybe that's why they've gone with the 4:20 Saturday time slot for them. And against Fremantle, I mean, obviously Fremantle have to play someone, but they did pretty well last year though in their gather round game, and it was a comeback. It was a decent game, much better than what I thought it was going to be. So who knows? We might see something decent here, but should be a fairly one-sided affair. And then the next game, which should be close, which makes it memorable, will be played at the Adelaide Oval. Same day, of course, 8:10 time slot, Geelong versus the Western Bulldogs. Now, the thing that I don't understand with this one is why are they doing it in gather round, I guess, because this would be a pretty good game at GMHBA or even Marvel. But yeah, no, they've chucked it at Adelaide Oval and gather round. It's going to be a good game, in my opinion, but yeah, at the Adelaide Oval just seems a little bit weird, but you should get a decent crowd for it, so you never know. This one might surprise me, but at the moment, I don't really rate it that highly. Then moving on to the Sunday games, they're all pretty, I wouldn't say dead, but interesting. Like, games that are very, very different to what I've got in my predictions. It will be the second game at Adelaide Hills, which is interesting. They'll become the 5th and the 6th team, respectively, to play at the Adelaide Hills. At a 12:30 time slot on April 7th, it will be Gold Coast versus GWS. Now, this one could be a good game. You never know with this one. But GWS was so good at every venue this year that they'll come in with advantage, in my opinion, in this game already. I mean, obviously, you can't really tell because the season hasn't started yet, but yeah, it should be an interesting one. You never know. I see Gold Coast winning this game. It'll be an interesting one. And then at Norwood, a couple hours later, 3:20 Victorian time, of course, it's going to be Richmond versus St Kilda. Now, this one could be a good game if it was at the Adelaide Oval. To have it at Norwood, yeah, nah, it's just too small of a ground. They've got both decent fan bases. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the time. Sorry, not the time, the venue for this one. I would have preferred to have it at the Adelaide Oval. Maybe swap this one and for Carlton and Fremantle, have them play at Norwood maybe. That's what I would have done. But yeah, otherwise it could be a close game, so it could become memorable. And then moving on to the final game at 5:10 Victorian time, Collingwood versus Hawthorn. Now this is the big one. This is the one we all should be excited for. It's Dan McStay versus Jack Ginnivan. It's Collingwood versus Hawthorn. It's the rematch of this year's devastating game, let's just say. Yeah, it's at the Adelaide Oval. Should be an interesting one. Hopefully we can win, because I'm not actually 100% confident on this one. We have played pretty well at the Adelaide Oval recently, though. Should be an interesting game. Pretty excited for it. Obviously, against Ginnivan, it means quite a bit. Should be a good game. I hope. Having it at the Adelaide Oval is good. The only thing that I would complain about this one is maybe not have it in gather round, because I would have preferred to, no offence, but I would have preferred to have bashed Jack Ginnivan up on the MCG than at the Adelaide Oval, and I think most Collingwood fans would agree. Oh well. Adelaide Oval, yeah, it could become a good game. You never know. Yeah, not a huge opinion on next year's gather round, to be honest. A lot worse in my opinion than this year, but you never know. It could change. There could be really, really good games in there that make me change my mind. But yeah, I can already tell you that the matchups for this year's gather round were a lot better. But it still could be good. Quite excited. Should be a fun round, obviously. Won't be going, unfortunately. Haven't been to gather round first 2 times. But to be honest, do I really want to go to this gather round? Yeah, that's a big question. I don't see as much people going to this gather round than this year's, because, yeah, it's just got so much less entertaining games, a lot more dead games. Like, I can't quite remember who played who this year in in the gather round, but I know Collingwood played St Kilda, and it was a great game. Probably the best game of the whole gather round. I know Adelaide played Carlton and Port Adelaide played Bulldogs. They seem a little bit better to me than Adelaide, Melbourne and Port Essendon, but oh well. And there was a few really close games in there, like Fremantle versus Gold Coast. I believe the Port Bulldogs game was somewhat close. And then the final two in the Hawks Giants and Collingwood St Kilda. And there was a few smashes in there too. There was an unexpected win from Essendon. Brisbane smashed North. I think, Richmond lost by quite a bit in their game. I don't remember quite who it was. It might have been Sydney. And then that only leaves West Coast versus someone, and we all know that West Coast would have lost that one by a fair bit. Don't quite remember who it was. I think maybe Geelong, but not 100% sure on that one. But yeah, next year's gather round should be interesting, that's for sure. Hopefully it's a good one, and pretty exciting that we've already got fixtures being announced, because already Indigenous rounds been finalised at the moment, so they're obviously more than halfway there to completing next year's fixture, which is really, really exciting, and I hope to see it soon. I hope to be reacting to it soon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my reaction to next year's gather round, and I'll see you guys in the next one.